This is a Rattle and Hum Sports podcast for Friday, June the 28th, 2013. I'm Bryan Houston, and with us right now is the certified nutritionist, health advisor, pharmacy technician, and writer for Rattle and Hum Sports, Mika Bradford. How you doing, Mika?
Fantastic, Bryan. How are you doing?
Doing great. I just wanted you to know that in preparation for today's podcast, I just went out and ran for about 50 minutes. It's 99 degrees where I am right now, and I'm feeling really stupid right now, but I wanted to be able to talk about this intelligently as we talk about working out in the extreme Texas heat, otherwise known as hell.
And you know, Bryan, it may be 99 where you're at, but I'm telling you, yesterday, I think, over in Dallas, we hit well over the triple digits. So,
oh, stop bragging.
We're already close, yeah.
Stop
the
bragging.
The 100-plus mark.
Congratulations. All right, so
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Obviously, this is not going to go away. This is typical for North Texas every year. We are always, in the triple digits, it seems like, for 6 months out of the year. So let's talk about some of the dangers, some of the things that we need to be aware of as we try to stay in shape out in this heat.
You know, one of the things that I look at for all of us, whether it's going to be having our kids outside and participating in sports, whether it's hanging out at the lake and not realizing just how much of the fluids you've lost, and doing physical activities. If you're on the golf course and you're out golfing and, or water skiing or biking and running, staying hydrated affects all of us. And especially when you're in the temperature zones where we're hitting the triple digits and it's consistent, then we have to be more aware of what we're drinking. And so many people have gotten desensitized to, we're going through and we're picking up a soda or we're picking up some high sugar drink, and we're not drinking enough water in the first place. So, but in that same speech of talking about staying hydrated and drinking plenty of water, what's real important for all of us that are, 30 and above, and especially for the people that are on maybe blood pressure medications or eating and following the DASH diet. The DASH diet is where we're looking at heart-healthy foods and we're keeping our sodium content low, because too much sodium can cause issues with hypertension and high blood pressure. And so for average daily activities, watching the sodium intake is really critical and it's very important. However, when our level of activity changes, or if we're working out more, or if we're starting to utilize some of the saunas, whether it's the infrared sauna, and we're really pushing our body further to where we're losing more fluids through perspiration, then we need to be aware that drinking water may not be enough.
All right.
And that sounds crazy, but looking at, the electrolyte formulas and what are some options that can be taken that aren't high sugar. Of course, Gatorade's the go-to standby, whenever we've got the kids out and they're playing, or even for some of us as adult athletes. But when you're really paying attention to the amount of sugar and the fluids you're getting, there are other options that aren't going to increase the body burden or have to deal with any of the artificial sweeteners. And some of those things would look like tablets that, whether it's a sodium chloride tablet that's taken by itself, or even a company, there's a brand called Thermotabs. It's a salt supplement buffer tablet that is a potassium and sodium blend. And these products are used for whenever fatigue sets in, muscle cramps, and heat prostration.
All right, I got to ask you a question now. I'm old school, and I played high school football back in the 70s, where you were a sissy if you needed water, and your coaches would give you a couple of salt tablets before you went out for practice. And then we heard that was the craziest thing you could possibly do. Now, are you telling me that salt tablets are okay to take before you go out and exercise again?
Here's the thing. Salt tablets are okay to take, but you need the water to go along with them.
No, okay, I see.
So it's not like giving a salt block to a horse, we do need to make sure that you're getting plenty of fluids with it. So it's about balance and moderation. I think back to when we were growing up and, the two-a-days that the guys were doing here, getting ready for football in the North Texas heat and not getting any water and pushing them till they dropped, and think it is just by the grace of God that we didn't have more kids hurt from injury, whether it be with nervous system, muscles, just being exacerbated with the physical demands that they have. So, salt tabs are good, and water is even better in combination. But what happens is for us as adults, if you're drinking too much water and you have too low a sodium content, then there is a condition that truly is water intoxication, and it's also known as hyponatremia, and it can be fatal. It can cause issues with brain functioning, headaches, and it's literally where the normal balance of the electrolytes in the body is pushed out of what's considered safe limits, and it can happen because of overconsumption of water. So it's important for people that are on a low sodium diet, that maybe you're on some blood pressure meds. That's the other thing too, that if you're taking a blood pressure medication, many times when people start to get dizzy and lightheaded, it's not always about the blood pressure medication. It's about if you don't have enough sodium in your blood to keep the blood volume up, that can contribute to it as well. And I've seen that firsthand with a lot of clients.
How can you tell that you're drinking too much water?
I think that when you look at how much water should be taken in per day, I think that the ideal amount that we were looking at was going to be, I can give you some notes on age range. Let's take a look at this.
Okay.
Because for me, I know personally that I do probably about 8 16-ounce glasses of water a day.
Okay.
But at the same time, if you think about all the other drinks that we're drinking throughout the day, people grabbing sodas and you're having coffee. If you look at the water in place of that, then it really isn't adding to the fluids you're consuming quite as much as what you would expect.
Okay. All right.
So
go ahead.
Here, no, it's okay. I'm just taking a look. Let's see on here. Some of the things that with dehydration, and this is interesting, excessive thirst, these are just some of the symptoms. Sleepiness, dry mouth, fewer no tears when crying, muscle weakness, headache, dizziness, and lightheadedness.
And that's with excessive hydration.
That's whenever you are dehydrated.
Okay.
So that's don't have enough water.
Okay.
And so then when you're looking at the amount, usually on here they say that probably for adult men that about 3 liters a day, and for women says that 3 liters a day you're looking at for an adult man about 13 cups of water.
Okay.
And then for an adult woman you're looking at about 9.
Okay.
And so, if you're drinking fluids enough, then you're not going to always feel thirsty. And so, and also, when you look at urine color, when somebody's staying hydrated enough, the color of the urine should be faintly yellow, almost clear. Now, with the exception that if you are taking nutritional supplements that have a higher B content, then it is very common and it's to be expected that because of the way that the nutrients are broken down as a chemical byproduct, then the water can have a yellow or psychedelic yellow coloring to it. But that is because of the byproduct and the way that the nutrients are broken down. And that doesn't mean you're peeing your supplements out, literally. It just means that that's a cause and effect from those nutrients being metabolized appropriately. So other than that, when we look at staying hydrated, not only are we looking at a certain amount of fluids per day, but then also looking to see that the urine isn't a dark brown and it's not severe in discoloration.
All right. Now let's go back to the Gatorade and the sport drink topic. I know people that basically, instead of drinking any water at all, just drink nothing but sports drinks, Gatorade and so forth. What's the danger there?
Here's the thing. I know for years that we've had athletes and sports teams, and a lot of people have Gatorade not only as their sponsor, but as the drink of choice. But at the end of the day, we were created to consume water, and I believe all things in moderation. If you're doing the regular sports drinks, then you're going to get a lot of added sugars. And there are so many studies now showing that the bottom line is sugar is a molecule that, while it may taste great, that it can drive and stimulate inflammation in the body. And so, and there are multiple studies that look at that. And so to me, again, moderation, but water is what our bodies were designed to consume.
Okay.
And while we need some electrolyte replenishment, and of course Gatorade is one of the ways that we can support that, so are, some of the tablets that don't have the sugars, that can be a sodium-potassium chloride blend, also a sodium chloride blend for sodium chloride by itself. And then there are, of course, the little packets. I mean, we've got some companies now that are sports nutrition companies that carry along electrolyte packets. They're the little sachets that can easily be put in a sports bag or in your purse, even in some of the pockets of the biking shorts, to have with you in those situations. But definitely some options. I just think that you have to be mindful if you're participating in outdoor activities, again, whether it's golfing, biking, or whether you're working outside in the yard, or if you do physical manual labor throughout the summer months, working on construction or roofing. You've got to stay on top of staying hydrated and making sure that that low sodium diet that is healthy doesn't undermine your attempt at staying healthful throughout the entire year.
See, this leads to a common annual argument that we have when we talk about the Texas Rangers, who play in an open-air stadium in this extreme heat for 82-plus games every year. And the argument is that because of the extreme heat, that they wear down and fade at the end of the season, as opposed to those who think that, well, they play in this all the time, they should have an advantage because they're acclimated to it. On what side of that line do you fall?
Here's the thing. You can be acclimated to participating in an event under circumstances, but at the end of the day, if we have night after night after night of physical activities that push somebody to a specific level of endurance, but nutritionally, if they're not getting the replenishment or the amount of electrolytes that are specific to their needs based on their health profile, as well as if any of the guys are on blood pressure meds, then that repetition can literally have a cumulative effect, and wearing down makes complete sense. I mean, that's like having to go in and, after every 3,000 miles, rotate your tires. Well, just because you're used to it doesn't mean that I drive 3,000 miles and I don't rotate my tires.
Gotcha. Okay.
And for all of you car guys, I know you can go further than 3,000 miles, so you have to point that out, but I'm using it as an example.
That's a good example, though. That's a good analogy. All right. Explain exactly how the heat affects your body.
It makes all of us cranky here in Texas. It's just at the end of the day, fatigue, and the primary thing is with the water loss, with the perspiration, and that can change a lot of things with how we feel, how we think, thought process, the lightheadedness. It can impact a lot of different body functions. So I think besides being miserable and not so much fun, and definitely creating a market need for spray misters in the backyards and in the front yards.
Yeah.
I think the overall concern just with the heat is making sure that the body doesn't get dehydrated, because when you get dehydrated, that can cause a cascade of different events to happen. And if we're in a position where we're taking medications or we have health conditions, then the state of dehydration can definitely exacerbate that. And when you look too, even mild dehydration, as little as a 1 to 2% loss of body weight, can cause symptoms like weakness and being dizzy and fatigue. So it really can. I think that we're so conditioned not to think about staying on top of our water consumption that we don't realize sometimes when we're going and going and going that it may be that we need more fluids and need to be hydrated more than really being hungry or needing something else.
there's also the issue too now, even with people who are in really good physical condition and do a considerable amount of exercise and are acclimated to this heat. But talk about the factor of age.
Well, the age, I mean, when you look as far as the amount of fluid and retention that you're keeping, I mean, the activity level is going to be in relationship to age. And I think that when you look at our younger kiddos that maybe are constantly on the go, or teenagers, they're not necessarily going to think about it. I mean, they could be outside playing all day and all afternoon and not even stop for a break to eat something. So I think that we have to be mindful that when we're at that place of being in a mindset of having fun, you know, that old saying, time flies when you're having fun, that we have to be diligent as parents or caregivers for that. And then, of course, with the elderly, you know, we're talking about parents and grandparents. Dehydration can manifest. I mean, we can have issues with potentiating, issues with tachycardia, with racing heart. I mean, there's a lot of different symptoms. But, again, it's about more in relationship to the activity you're participating in and making sure that you're consuming enough to stay along the lines of what your body needs in relationship to your health conditions and any of the meds or supplements that you're on.
Okay, so in summarizing all this, what are some of the things? Obviously, we need to make sure that we're staying hydrated. What are some other things that we need to be watching out for when we're trying to avoid heat-related illnesses?
Well, when you're looking, I mean, to try and avoid heat-related illnesses, you just want to make sure that you're not going to be in a situation for an extended period of time where you don't have access to fluids. I mean, I personally think that it's a great thing to have water and take it along with you, even when you're doing road trips for a couple hours. I mean, now they've got some great polycarbonate water bottles that are reusable, so you can keep the water on hand, because there's always been discussions about different estrogens and things leaking from plastic containers, having the water bottles in the car for extended period of heat. So I think with looking at health conditions, making sure that you always have fluids or some form of water bottle on you at all times. You know, and what's important too is the smaller the body mass of the person, then there's a greater risk for complications. And that's why, especially even with kiddos, you know, with 1-year-olds, to absorb, you know, they can go through, and it's easy for them to have too much water too quickly. If they're smaller than 9 months, it's given too much because of their small body mass, so it can dilute their electrolytes quicker, as well as if they're in a situation where they sweat and lose too much fluids. The other thing, too, is when you look, marathon runners, you know, they're susceptible because if they drink too much water while running, that can dilute the sodium levels. So from a health condition standpoint, again, it's more about just knowing each person's body and knowing what events are you in a profile that you're going to be a smaller body mass, and you have to be concerned with if you drink too much or not enough. And then if you're participating with the running events that happen all throughout the year down here in the South, and making sure that you have the nutritional support on hand.
Okay. What else do we need to touch on that we've left out so far?
You know, I just think that overall, making sure you've got some kind of electrolyte product that you can take. You know, even people traveling out of the country, and that's a great area to look at when you're traveling out of the country, whether it's down south, if you're going to the tropics, or Mexico, or even going to Africa, and you're going to be out. I've got a lot of hunters, game hunters, that, you know, because of the chance of having any kind of dysentery or diarrhea that sets in because of eating foods that they're not accustomed to, or the bacterial content, taking and having electrolytes on hand, the tablets are a great thing, because obviously getting sick with diarrhea or some kind of virus that causes gastrointestinal upset, that can induce a state of dehydration very rapidly. And so I would suggest anybody that's traveling out of the country or going out for a vacation to have some of the sodium chloride tablets on hand, or electrolyte packets, as well as some probiotics, because that's another scenario besides being outside working and, having fun and activities, that those supports would come in play.
Well, very good. Well, Mika, we look forward to talking to you again. In the meantime, stay cool. Good luck with that, by the way.
Fantastic. I'm going to try. I'm not going to be outside too much in this Texas heat.
So, wise move. Hey, thanks very much for coming on with us as always. We look forward to reading more of your stuff on Rattle and Hum Sports. Anything coming up that we need to be watching out for?
Oh, gosh, I'm just trying to stay cool and watch some Rangers baseball and plan to maybe go on a trip or two myself. So I'm going to take it easy for a little bit and enjoy the kids being out of school.
Sounds like a plan. Mika, thanks very much for coming on with us as always.
Good deal. Thanks so much, Bryan. You have a great summer and keep it cool.
You too. Mika Bradford, the certified nutritionist, health advisor, pharmacy technician, and, of course, writer for Rattle and Hum Sports. This is a Rattle and Hum Sports podcast. I'm Bryan Houston. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.